light bulb started to click, when you started to realize, I don't know if this is what I want to be a part of. And I guess it took after getting married and having kids.
Well, it started before that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What started it, do you think?
I know exactly what started. I know the day. I started to get goosebumps just going back there. I probably need to give some props, credit to the actual Mormon ethos that actually ended up making me leave. Because one of the Mormon ethoses is like to love truth, to really love truth. And I really did. Like, I was really genuinely wanting to know what the truth was, and I wanted to keep learning, because learning is how you keep advancing.
Right.
Like, that's how you're going to get to be a god and have your own planet,
right.
or whatever, is through continuing it to advance. So from an early age, I was obsessed with learning and learning things new. I was homeschooled. My birth mom was the main teacher. She did the best that she could, but in a lot of ways, I became self-taught. One of the subjects I became obsessed with was math, because it was the most clear. Graduated high school, and then I was bored out of my mind working a construction site for a couple of years, and so I made at the time, and still to this day actually, I became the first sibling to go to college.
Wow.
So this is where the story really begins in my life. They didn't want me to go at first. I had to convince my dad to let me go, and he had me go to my grandfather, who's one of the council members, actually.
To make sure it was an okay thing to do?
Yeah, because we were all preparing for the second coming of Christ.
Right.
And trying to put ourselves in a condition that God could, whatever God was going to do with us or whatever.
And how was going to college going to benefit in the second
Exactly.
coming?
Bingo. And worse, my dad, which he wasn't wrong in retrospect, neither was my grandfather. They were not wrong in retrospect. They were concerned that I would be fed strange ideas from liberal professors. And one day, I remember my dad saying, like, you're going to come out of there, you're going to start wearing short sleeves and doing something. I promise that'll never happen. Well,
I lied.
So this is where the coming out actually starts. So I go to college. My grandfather, when I went and met with him, was very clear on, like, don't have friends in college. Go to classes, go home. Go to classes, go home. Do not party, do not go to anything. And again, we still have the same, like you mentioned something earlier, where the outside world was a little bit scary.
It took a while, even after I left, like, because I feared, and it's funny, like, I would fear outsiders, and then I would fear different races more, and I would fear people with tattoos more, and people with cigarettes, because of what they told me about them.
I mean, there were so many things, like, this is stuff I haven't talked about on any other podcast. Like, one of the things that blew my mind is how invisible I was. Because I was taught that I had the priesthood. And so I had this, like, special power, and that people would be curious. And even though I was dressed long sleeves and what I think kind of weird, nobody talked to me at the time. Like, and it blew my mind, because I was sure, because
you're like, do you know who I am?
I'm in the true church. God's obviously going to make somebody come. Like, I ended up getting some friends, but it was never religious, and that shocked me.
You're like, no one's following me.
Mormonism, especially for dudes, really plays on, like, this narcissism that I don't think people realize. And again, I have a lot of great Mormon friends that are super nice, and they might even not like me saying this, but it's just what I see, so I have to call it out. Like, there's this whole, like, it plays on this, like, you get to be a person for God, which sounds awesome. You get to be the head of your kingdom, which sounds awesome. And you get to go up and be a god, which sounds awesome. Like, it plays, like, who doesn't want those things? Who doesn't want a leader? Anyway, so I think that's probably where my attitude, thinking that I was going to have people reaching out or whatever as soon as I went to college.
Do you feel like it breeds, like, that religion breeds narcissists?
Well, yeah. It creates the conditions by which it can flourish. And I think a lot of humans have that tendency, but then they're checked. Society or other groups check them. In my opinion, the reason Mormonism even exists is because of how, I mean, look at what happened. Two big things happened. Joseph Smith died, and now he became, like, a martyr. But the other thing is it moved to Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Who was out here?
No one.
Nobody checked it.
That's a good point.
If you're a guy, if you are, like, everybody's taught to submit to priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
So you're being the priesthood to your family. So if you're being a narcissist, like, you're taught to, like, submit to him.
Yep.
But it gets worse the higher up you go.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you are a church leader, like, this is why I think John Timpson is so freaking insane, like the way he preaches with people, is because if you call him out, there's nobody to check them. There's literally, like, they say women should be checked by their husband to make sure they're in line. The men are checked by the church authority.
That's literally like our we believe in the law one above another. Women, you tie into your husband, the husband ties into the leadership. Yep.
And the church leaders are tied into Jesus.
Right. And
So-
we don't have access to Jesus.
Exactly. So who's checking the priesthood?
Right.
Jesus. Jesus ain't coming to check them, though. It's so, how genius. So,
Genius is it?
Wait, sorry, can I switch this out really quick? This is just at 1%, so it's gonna die.
How do you get people to just give you all of the money, right? Give you everything. Is you tell them their salvation's on the line, right?
yeah, by the way, we had the exact same thing, and it's literally called the order inside that.
It's called the order.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Do you know what the name the order is coming from?
Consecration, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was
So
what,
that is within my church.
because our church said the LDS church fell away when they stopped living polygamy and consecration.
Totally.
Right? And so you guys believe that same
Literally the same thing.
Okay.
Those are the two crowning principles of the celestial kingdom.
thing?
Is polygamy and living the united order. Yeah.
And what is that to you guys?
In the united order, consecration. So you give up all worldly possessions, everything to God. But what are you giving it up to? To men. You're giving it up to John Timpson and
Yep.
Claude Colley and Jed Hammond.
And you're gonna put it away and save it for Jesus. The whole thing is like how Jesus isn't coming, how you were just talking about. It's like that. It's the perfect plan for the one on top, right? Because everyone's willingly giving it. And
Dude, it's like the worst MLM scam.
it really is. It's a pyramid scheme.
And it's literally the same thing of like most MLMs, because there's like promising these riches, but it's like the riches is salvation. Like, just do all this thing. I actually feel like that Joseph Smith was like the original MLM maker, because he kind of did, like, Mormon. A lot of Mormonism is that way, like, sacrifice this, give this. Like, Joseph Smith is the one that invented, or like, it's not a new idea, he actually borrowed it from other places, but like this whole idea of full consecration, full sacrifice, give it all to God, because then you don't have worldly possessions or whatever, but then you're going to be blessed. But then in your case, it sounds like it screws people, like, in a big way.
Oh, definitely. Because to live consecration the correct way, you need to, in our group anyways, they have us signing all these forms, inventory 10% forms, basically saying everything we have is theirs.
Yes.
And so...
I was this close to joining, like, the year that I left
Joining what?
the United Order.
So I'm hearing in the FLDS, and in yours, I guess, apparently, so in the FLDS, they have the people in the crick, right? But then there's the righteous one who gets sent to, like, North Dakota, or South Dakota, is it? South Dakota, where it's like the higher-ups are going to. Is that what you guys had? So the United Order is like, it's like a cult within the cult?
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. It's a cult within the cult, and it's becoming more of a thing, from my understanding now in my church.
So you had the opportunity to join it?
Yes. Yeah, so...
But you're already in the Centennial Group.
There's the work, which is the church itself, and within...
It's like graduating.
It's like join the United Order. It's a cult within a cult where you are signing forms and basically signing all of your possessions over to the church. Because you can be in the church and go to priesthood meeting and do all the church functions and just be part of the church. But you can also, if you really want the extra special blessings, I just love how Mormonism has all these hoops. There's so many hoops.
If you do this.
Yeah, but there's more! But yeah, so you can join the United Order. And if you join the United Order, you give everything up to the church. And this is happening right now, today, in 2023.
Can I ask, what enticed you to want to do that?
Be a good boy.
Be a good boy.
Be for God. Like
the
the whole thing.
order expects that from everyone.
Yeah.
All the members.
The social, dude, status?
That's what my next question was going to be, actually. Do the people in the United Order look down upon these little servants?
Of course.
And you're like, I want to be up there with them.
You're like, who's in the United Order? And it's like a form of almost like how regular society has what are people doing? Like virtue signaling. It's a virtue signal.
It's almost like a society within a society, but they can still associate with the others.
Everybody still associates,
Yeah.
but
Could a
for now.
woman who wants to be a part of the United Order marry into it?
I don't see why not, except she's probably connected to her dad.
So it depends on if he's in the
And if he's in the United Order, great. But if he's not, I think you would be advised to wait until you're married and see if your husband's going to be a part of it. Like,
Was there a reward? Like in ours, they get a number usually if they're
Oh,
like
yeah.
that dedicated.
We
Do
have
they
a
get
numbered
anything?
system. I guess that could be considered a cult instead of cult, right? Because you have all these members who are trying so hard to get into heaven, but then these righteous men, like our dad has number 36, the leader has number 9. It's a number
that's
system.
fucking weird. That's one thing I noticed in yours that I was watching some of your videos. You guys have a number?
Yeah.
That sounds like that sounds like something like a Hunger Games thing or something.
Or mafia.
Yeah.
They say there's a lot of similarities to the mafia. Actually, our cult is known as the mafia of the polygamists. But it started, so I'll just do a brief description of it because I'm learning more because I have older Generation X members who are telling me because I'm doing these episodes every week, so people give me a lot of information. In the beginning, it was everyone got a number who joined. So the first person was the leader, Eldon, in 1935. He got number 1. And then number 2, number 3, number 4, and then when he died, our grandpa became the leader, and then he turned it into once you get a number, you got your ticket to heaven. And so then he only gave 4 numbers out because he was kind of like he gave a number to someone and then they left, and so he's like, you're down to hell because you had that number and you gave it up. So then he only gave 4 numbers, and then Paul now, the leader now, is kind of turning it into, what are you going to do for me for your number? You know what I mean? So then they're doing all these things to please give me that number because it's my ticket to heaven, my salvation, so they're kissing his ass. So it's evolved. Crazy though, right? And I heard, have you ever heard of the Jehovah's Witness believe in this? There's only like 440,000 that are going to make it into the kingdom.
Yeah.
Did you guys believe in that?
Yeah.
So I heard that may be a belief of the ticket, the numbering. They're like counting up to that number.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
So that silly belief, yeah, are you going to be part of the
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to give a rough, quick description of the numbering system. Dang it. Okay, so we were talking about the cult within the cult, but we kind of got sidetracked. We were at the point of where you were talking about where you were starting to realize, but you wanted to join the cult within a cult, and then you realized after going to school that you're like, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to be part of any of this.
Yeah. It wasn't that fast, as you know. So when I joined college, I took a philosophy class. This is where it really, really, really begins. So what you have to understand is I wasn't, especially up to this point, so I'm like 20.
Mm-hmm.
I am in. Like, I'm not questioning anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know for a fact that this is God's one true church.
Yep.
And I'm just going to keep on learning. I want to know truth, so I go to college, and I wasn't even supposed to take this philosophy class, I don't think. Like, it was an elective, but I was trying to fit a time in, and that was a class during that time, because I was taking generals. And I took this philosophy class, and it changed the fate of my life. So the class the whole semester was themed off of The Matrix, the movie, which is fascinating. But we also were being told this story from Plato's allegory of the cave. And we were told this story. I'll just mention it briefly. The professor tells us the whole story, that there are people chained inside this cave. This is like just some psychological fun story to reflect on. And she asks us, are these people sad? And immediately I was like, well, yeah, of course they're sad. They're chained in a cave. And she's like, no, that's where they've been their whole life. Yeah, but they're chained. She's like, that's all they know.
They don't know anything different.
Yeah, so they're not. And I was like, interesting. I think you're right. Yeah, why would they be sad? She's like, right. And then once a day, these shadows in front of them appear on a wall. And they're like so excited because that's, and I was like, why are they excited? They're just shadows. Like, because that's all they see. He's like, interesting. Yeah.
The only entertainment they have.
And so they obsess over it. They argue. They're like, these shadows are amazing. But then to speed up the story, one of the people in Plato's story breaks loose from the chains. And he noticed there's a back wall that he'd seen before, like a glow or whatever, and it's like, checks out the back wall for the first time. It blows his mind, because the whole time he thought the shadows were ultimate reality, but that he looks behind this wall and there's someone holding up some shapes in front of a flame.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you can just imagine being that person, that you think the shadows aren't just their own entertainment, like they thought the shadows were more real than them. Like the
Right.
shadows were so real because it's all they knew. That then he sees that the shadows were being created by somebody holding up an object. So it scared him, but then he sees a crack in the wall and leaves the cave. So if you can imagine that if he saw a shadow of a tree, he thought that was ultimate reality. Then he sees a shape of a tree
Mm-hmm.
and thinks that's ultimate reality.
Right.
Then he sees a real tree.
Yep.
Like,
The mind is blown.
not just blown, but it's almost like we get settled on what we think we know to be true. Like, it's
Yeah.
so difficult to explain this to someone,
Mhm.
like what it means to get your reality, like,
Right.
fully shifted. Like, I get, again, getting goosebumps when I go back there, because it's like, so, I'll finish the story and then so this guy, after he gets scared, like his whole identity, because everything he thought he knew was not true.
Right.
There was so much more, but after it scared him, he's like, there's so much more to life. This is amazing. And he lived and he explored, but then he started to realize, but I still have friends and family
Mm-hmm.
down in the cave. They need to know about the world.
Mhm.
So he goes back down to the cave. His eyes had adjusted to the outside world, so he was hard to see, so he stumbled. And they're like, are you okay? Have you gone blind? He's like, no, like, there's this thing called light. They didn't really know what that was. But then he starts to tell them about trees and plants and life outside of the world.
It's too much.
They have no idea what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They think he's gone mad. They think he's crazy because they have no frame of reference.
Right.
And so finally, like, they're confused. They're like, whatever you did, like, you must have gone nuts. And then somebody kind of, he's like, it's like the best thing ever. No, and then somebody's like, but what could be better
Than
than
the
the
shadows.
shadows? Like, that's the best. And he's like, don't you understand? What I've seen compared to the shadows, like, these shadows are nothing compared to what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
But then they feel threatened, and they're like, you're trying to take away our shadows?
Yep.
And so they kill him. At
Right.
least that's how the story was told. So what happened was, I just got told that story. And I'm just sitting there in my classroom chair listening to it, and I'm like, that's a cool story.
Mhm.
And I'm not really thinking about, like, the
correlation.
implications. I'm not thinking about the implications at all. I'm just like, cool story, because again, another side tangent, we didn't grow up reading fiction at all, because how's that going to help you with salvation? Read
The
church
Bible
approved,
only.
and Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, church approved.
Right.
But then my professor says, okay, who are you in the story? I was like, And remember how I said earlier how I love truth?
Yeah.
This was a big moment for me. In fact, I don't think I've ever gone this detailed. It's like telling this. So she's like, who knew the truth? People in the cave or the guy leaving? And it was like obvious. Well, he went out and he actually experienced truth. It's like, okay, are you willing to do that? Man, that's touching me back. That's weird.
Were you in that moment like, yes, obviously, or were
Kind
you
of.
like,
Yes, but I'm remembering the unlock. Like, it's so strange how that just touched me, because she was like, are you willing to leave your cave? She's like, are you the guy that's willing to leave everything you've ever known in pursuit of truth? And as she's explaining this, I'm like, I would like to think I'm somebody that pursues truth. But then she said, how do you know, and how do you know you're not the one sitting in the cave right now? How do you know that you think you're pursuing truth? You're pursuing ultimate reality, but how do you know that you're just not looking at shadows on a wall?
what did you say to that?
My mind exploded and hit the ceiling. Because I realized in that moment, because I thought of the projection, right? Because what were the shadows? The shadows were what the people thought were truth
Mm-hmm.
and ultimate reality. But where was it coming from? Somebody's projection. Like somebody was
Right.
giving that to them. In that moment, I shit myself. I can't describe the terror that I felt. Because for the first time, I was like, everything that I knew, the best things I knew of life and why I was here and where I was going, was a projection from my dad, from my church leaders, from the books they all told me to read.
Right.
And I realized that moment, there's not a single thing in my life up to this point. I did like this, like I had a flashback. Like, it's so crazy. Look at this.
Yep, goosebumps.
It's so crazy to revisit this because I realized there was not a single thing that was meaningful in my life that I had internally discovered. There was not any, I had not left anything I had ever known.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, the next thought that scared me so fucking much, I cannot even describe the fear at the time, was, what if all this is fake?
I actually went through the same thing, but after I left, because I had to break, you know when you leave, you have to break down and rebuild your whole belief system.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if people realize that.
It's very depressing at first.
Lonely as fuck.
Yeah.
Like in that moment, I can't describe the feeling of loneliness. Because here's why. Who am I talking to about this realization?
Yeah, no one. No one's gonna understand it.
Literally no one. First of all, am I gonna go talk to a Gentile? No, I can't even tell them where I'm coming from. Can I go talk to a sibling? No.
You're gonna worry about your salvation.
I'm gonna tell them that I'm doubting this, and they're not gonna get the analogy that I just got. And so it put me in a deep hole of loneliness. The one sense of comfort was, well, I still realized, I do want truth, even if that means leaving the cave or whatever. But the one sense of comfort is at the time, I still believed the work was true. And so then I realized, okay, if it's true, I'll be the guy that leaves the cave, and I'll just find that it's the truth.
And come back.
It's gonna lead back, because it's the truth. I just decided that I was still gonna follow truth, and if it's true, it'll turn back. And I hoped it did.
Yeah.
Like, deep in my soul, I hoped that all the studying I was now gonna do, and everything I was gonna search, if it was God's true church, it would point back to it. I was 20, and so what then started happening is now that created what I call a crack. So my mind's now open to different things. I'm still going to church, doing all these things.
Well, your family, your friends, everything you know is still there. So you're still there.
I'm studying Mormon culture, Mormon history. I'm seeing, why do people think this way? Like, how do I know? Like, for the first time, I'm now flexible in my thinking. I'm now like, why do the Kingstons think that they have it? Why does the FLDS think they have it? Why does the AUB think they have it? Why does the Mormon Church think they have it? And then I started noticing something interesting. Like, I'm starting to piece things together. Like, people that are in the FLDS, for example, they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that they had it. And then I made this realization, and I was like, no, that's just what you were told. Then also, like, you probably think that just because you're born into it. And then I self-reflect. And I'm like, how do I know that?
Yeah.
Now here's, I think, something that is different, because a lot of people do focus on the beliefs and the teachings. I went a different direction. I went fully internal, and everything that I then started studying was my own psychology of, like, why am I believing what I'm believing? Just like I'm looking at somebody in the FLDS, I know, just logically, like, chances are they probably believe it because they were born into it. And I was like, okay, if that is true, how many people that are in FLDS are born into it? Oh, 90+%. How many people that are in the work right now were born into it somehow? Oh, 90+%.
Right.
Interesting.
And what makes you different than that person that's devoted over
Bingo.
there?
Because what I did think was, I was in it because it was the truth. I was in it because we were the one true church. That's why I was in it. I started to get really sincere and honest with myself and realize that there's no difference between me and someone else. Like, and that's a scary thought.
Right.
Which is, I don't even know why I even thought that I could think that it was okay to think that that I'm not special.
A lot of people think it's the easy way out is to leave. Actually, the easy way is to stay in that comfort zone, right?
Okay, let's fast forward a little bit. So, because that's such a good point, because people, I can never describe the anguish that this journey of leaving has been. What's hard to describe to people is my journey from that point to leaving has by far been the most traumatic thing I've ever experienced as a human being.
Yeah.
It is not the shit that I grew up in, which I did grow up in shit. There was stuff that happened growing up in a cult that was not good.
It's the process of going from there to the next place, right?
Yeah, and deconstructing literally your whole reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, imagine that you were born in the Truman Show, like the movie The Truman Show,
yeah.
where you're like in it. Like, when you become awake that there's this thing, the Matrix, like that's what it feels like. So from there, my mind was always open. I still wanted to be a good kid. I still wanted to get married and all that stuff. So I graduate college. I get married. I decide that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to work for myself. And what I now know in retrospect is I had this drive, yes, for truth, but the other thing was I had this drive for freedom. And at the time, I thought it was just like financial freedom. Mm-hmm. So I quit my job, cold turkey, and I moved out of this state for the first time in my life. Okay, I'm 27 at this time. And I went and lived in Southern California.
They let you do that?
I was married, and here's the thing. In my culture, I don't know why I did this. Like, I had this independent streak happening where Waymans had this reputation for being too connected to their father, to their dad.
Oh, okay.
And I had this thing, was like, I'm not going to be one of those Waymans. But like, it was actually like almost like a shame thing. It's like, Waymans are way too close to their dad. Like, and so it was scary. No, it was a big deal for me to realize I'm going to move away. And I was terrified that my dad was going to be pissed. Like, it's weird now for me to think this way. But so I did it. I left. I went and lived in Southern California. I checked in with John Timpson to make sure it was okay.
Yeah.
And that gave me, he was like, yeah, go do it and come back and build a house in Centennial. And I was like, okay, cool. So that gave me it was terrifying to quit my job. And that was by its own self terrifying. But having the crack, the thing that happened in philosophy class was one thing. Mm-hmm. Living outside of the bubble is a completely different animal.
Right.
I don't know how you've experienced like living away.
Oh yeah.
But when you're out of it, like the way I describe it to people that have been born into the work and a part of it, it's like you're in Utah and you think that there's California over there. But when you go to California and you're like, to me, it felt like I went to a new planet. And this is not a thing on California. That's not the point. The point is like, you don't realize how you just orient to the reality of the bubble that you're in.
Yeah. Well,
and
it's also because I don't know if you had it like we did. I mean, I'm sure you did. Sunday was church. We went to the private school where they were teaching the same thing. The weekend was the
very structured.
Every single day, you are taught, reiterated. It is drilled into your brain. You're going to California, and now the veil has been lifted. Kind of, you're not. It's not being grilled into your.
Yeah. So then I started to realize again there were some things that I was having thoughts around from the philosophy class and taking other psychology classes. But when you're out of it and you really don't feel the pressures anymore,
mm-hmm.
like I'm in a different state, and then I can reflect on it.
Yep.
And then, I mean, one of the craziest things is I started meeting amazing people.
Yep. And you're like, this isn't supposed to be happening.
Yeah. And then I hired this business coach that's like a Christian business coach to help me grow my business. And we go on Tuesdays, he has business and Bible or whatever. And so I go with a bunch of entrepreneurs to his house and they start sharing stories of these good things that are happening in their life that they feel blessed by. And this really shook me because where are good things supposed to come from?
Only your Timpson guy, right?
Exactly. So blessings are supposed to come from God through his church priesthood, mm-hmm. like the Timpson guy in the council. And I'm seeing these amazing blessings come from people that don't have any tie to Mormonism at all. And so then I have to ask myself, is it the devil? Is he blessing them? Is he fucking them over and they think it's from, or is it?
But they're over here reading the Bible. So it's like messing with your head.
Oh.
Like, these are good people.
Good people wrecked my world in the best way.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm with these people and I realize they're good people.
Mm-hmm.
I start hanging out with different ethnicities.
Yeah.
I started to open up for the first time because I told almost nobody in college, mm-hmm. but I start opening up a little by little. Again, like I get into this like entrepreneur space. Like I write I actually started speaking on stage about how I started my business. Like I wrote a book.
What business did you do?
I had a social media agency, like just not
cool.
not a big deal, like just a small little social media agency.
Wow.
But I start going on different podcasts, telling people about my business, but I, for the most part, kept it all quiet where I'm coming from. I wrote an entrepreneurial business book, like it's a personal development book.
What's it called?
Fish Out of Water.
Fish Out of Water? Okay.
Yeah, like people like.
By Calvin.
Yeah.
Calvin Wayman.
But in Fish Out of Water, no mention of this because I'm going through like this whole external journey around entrepreneurship, but the internal journey is where it's like really like raging. And again, meeting people, because I am now living as an entrepreneur and I'm living nomadically, I'm like, I want to keep learning. I start traveling, not just different states, different countries. I go to Costa Rica, I go to Israel. Like that was a big one. Like I went to Israel, went to Jerusalem, started hanging out with Orthodox Jews and seeing their views, hearing people talk that have been living for generations that had no concept of Mormonism. Like I can't even describe the feeling that I don't think enough people will ever get to experience. That sounds scary, but it's one of my favorite experiences of my life is feeling the depths of your own ignorance. And learning all these things, you realize how much there is to know.
Right.
And then hopefully learning the depths of your own insignificance. Like that you like, because when I'm in it, like the work is the only reason the earth is here because God is keeping everything alive for us.
What does your wife think of you questioning things?
We started to get a little bit more contentious. Like honestly, at the very beginning of our relationship, she came from a more liberal family, like her dad went to college. At first, it wasn't that scary, but then eventually it got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm gonna let you go through this journey and get, holy crap, you're really questioning this. And so it got to the point where I made the personal choice. Like I was like, holy crap, like I started piling it up, like I have the audio. I don't know if we're gonna have like part of the audio clip that's played on Anthony's show where I have an audio note. I pulled out my phone on my iPhone the moment that I decided. And but the first like 15 minutes or whatever, I'm just talking out, it's just afraid for me to, it's almost like you can, about to say it, and then I finally come out and say.
Apartment in Centennial Park, Arizona. What I'm doing is reflecting on what I really want is whether or not I'm going to stay with the community, with the family, with the religion that I've been a part of for the last 29 plus years. And
so I decide. And so I eventually, of course, tell her, and eventually what it ultimately leads to is that was the end for us.
Wow, so she stayed.
She's a polygamist.
She's a polygamist.
She's remarried and she's a second wife.
Wow, oh my gosh. So you left, you still get like visitations with your kids, but then it's like that.
Yeah, and it took a while because I left and that was a big question mark. What did that mean for us? Because we had a priesthood marriage. If you're in fundamentalist Mormonism, you need to be married to a worthy, good priesthood man, right?
Right.
That's how you're going to have your ticket into the celestial kingdom.
Your ticket is your husband.
Yeah. It became clear that we had completely different directions. And so it was my choice that I was, after, like, we had a billion conversations of, like, what should we do? It was clear that she wanted to stay. I didn't want to, I had already left. And we wanted very different things out of life. Right. So I eventually said, this was so heartbreaking too. Like, in fact, in some ways, just as hard. But coming to, because it's not like our marriage was like hating each other, but we wanted different things.
Right.
And so I got to the point where I was just like, go do your thing, I'm gonna do my thing, we're gonna separate.
Yeah. And ultimately that's the best decision you could make.
Yeah, at the time that was so freaking impossible to feel.
Yeah.
But I just had to believe that that was the best.
Right.
So that's what I did. So
Right.
the separation for us has been like 3 years, 4 years.
Oh wow,
now.
that's kind of, yeah.
This
that's
is fresh.
pretty
This
new.
whole second life is fresh.
So then when you got out, how were you treated by her, by family, by everyone you never known was there? So how did they treat you after that? And how did you announce it? Like how did it?
Oh man.
I guess that's a loaded
No,
question.
no, but it's all the same thing. Here's the thing. It's not that anybody has never left the work. I think I'm the first person to leave and to leave publicly. So when I left, it was important to me for some reason to own my choice.
Mhm.
Like I was like what I told in my announcement video is like I feel like a 20-something-year-old kid that's leaving their parents' house for the first time. Does that mean that you hate your parents because you're leaving the house? No, but it's time to, like, maybe you're grateful for the things they've given you, but now it's time to move on.
Goodness.
Yeah. And so when I left very publicly on Facebook. I was already doing videos and content because of my entrepreneurial world. And then all of a sudden I have this video, it's like, yo, I'm leaving my religion. And again, that was, to me, was just to own it, but it created a shitstorm in the work.
People were mad.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Some people disowned me immediately. Like, I would say more than 90% of the people that I grew up with and knew was just like, and that's a whole other part of this whole feeling of loneliness and everything, because you're like, holy crap.
Was
like,
a lot of it family, like siblings?
oh yeah.
Or,
Yeah, some siblings, because some siblings were more accepting than others. But the sibling thing eventually turned around, because, I mean, I don't know, like our family's our family, so I feel accepted within my family at this point.
Are you allowed home for Christmas?
Yeah.
Things like that? Oh.
Christmas? What are you talking about? Who does Christmas?
Oh, you guys don't believe in Christmas. I
It's actually funny, you
forgot.
missed it. I actually just now took care of my Christmas tree. I had it standing here. I love Christmas because I didn't grow up around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. FLDS. I actually helped some people because I was on Escape Polygamy, helping people from the FLDS leave, and I would make sure to give them a Christmas gift. I'm like, what are they gonna do for Christmas? And then
Yeah.
one guy was like, we don't even celebrate
Yeah,
it.
dude,
I was like,
Christmas
oh.
is the best. I love Christmas. But anyway, yeah, when I left, it was a big deal within the church, and yeah, I basically was, and it was challenging because at the time I had moved from California and was living in Centennial.
Oh, so you were in the
I
area
was
where
in
they
it.
all were.
I was in it, so I officially left. I was traveling, so that helped.
Yeah.
But I would like go to the grocery store.
Didn't see them.
Yeah,
How would
and
they treat you?
like I was an apostate. Like
Sickness and illness, they wanted to stay away from you?
more than that, like how everybody, I can't convince them otherwise. I mean, it's partly true, I guess, but they, because I want to be a part of the world, I want to make an impact, I want my story to help people, but they're like, yeah, he's one of those people that Satan got, that got sucked into the allure of the world.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know the whole internal journey, but it's like, oh, it's just, yeah, Satan got him.
Yeah.
Because he went out in the world and got out of the protection.
And
of this.
obviously, like, you can sit and laugh now about how they believe, but it hurts when it's those people were people you grew up with. Those people were people you loved and you thought loved you unconditionally.
Thank God for therapy is all I can say.
I have that big right here, therapy, because
Nice.
I wanted to ask you, as a man coming out of this, I don't know a lot of men who come out of these cults who are
Yeah.
willing to do therapy.
Dude, I don't know what to do without it.
When did you start?
Well, it depends on what you call therapy, because when I left, 2 weeks later, I was in Costa Rica doing an ayahuasca ceremony. Like,
No way.
yeah, I needed a flush. Like,
Yeah.
what I really needed is I needed a connection to who, like, I'd heard things in the entrepreneurial world of people that got really good things out of these different modalities. And so when I left, I wanted to find some connection that was me outside of the work.
Yeah.
And I certainly got it in Costa Rica doing rhythmia. But I've also done a lot of talk therapy and stuff like that. So it's helped me a lot over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I love therapy. Therapy is, I just feel like it's nice to have an unbiased person to bounce your
Yeah.
thoughts and ideas off and to self-reflect.
Totally. It's hard to find someone that truly understands the depth of how deep this rabbit hole goes. And the trauma in it, like, I didn't just watch somebody get hurt, like, I saw that too, but like there's like the whole social dynamics around it. Somebody recently told me that I need to get a therapist that is like has come from like war PTSD or something, because they actually truly understand it.
Yeah.
Because I'm still finding some layers in my own psyche like even earlier you asked me like, can you say his name? And I had to say, yeah, John Timpson. Like it took me a second, just because forever we were taught that if you said John Timpson or Claude Colley or a church leader, and you said something that's criticizing them, like John Timpson's a fucking psycho,
Then lightning's gonna strike you.
yeah, because again, it's like, it's the first step to the worst part of hell, is to criticize God's anointed.
Right.
And they're God's anointed, so they're hands off. But then who the hell's putting them, who's holding them accountable? Fucking no one.
Exactly. That leads me to my next question then. Are you comfortable talking about what you believe in now?
Yeah,
What do you believe in?
that's a
Are
good
you
question.
agnostic? Is there a label that you put on it?
There's a few ways to answer this question. One question is, I tell people, I've joined a new church. There's one member. There is no proselytizing. It's not seeking converts, and it's the Church of Calvin Women. So
Who's got two thumbs?
exactly. So like when I left, I wondered that with like, was I leaving fundamentalism? Was I going to go to the Mormon church? Am I going to go to regular Christianity? I'm allergic to dogma. I see it in other parts of society as well, where if it feels dogmatic in any way, like I get it, I see the value of religion and how it is a lot of people, but I'm not tied to any particular religion. If there is a label, agnostic is probably
So you don't believe or disbelieve, there's no proof for it or proof against it type of
right.
thing?
I think the most honest thing I could ever say, and it's one of the most difficult 3 words that any adult can say. I think I love you is probably like one very difficult, because it's a vulnerable thing to say, but the second most difficult thing to say is I don't know. And that's the most honest answer.
Yeah.
And so agnostic, I mean, I would also say like I'm a humanist, I guess. Like the more I believe in like the human spirit, I believe in like the individual's capacity to make change in their lives and empowering other people.
Yeah.
But I'm not, and I'm still exploring, you know?
I used to find a lot of, is fear the right word? Kind of, like I was afraid that I didn't know. Because, I don't know if you went through this, but going your whole life knowing exactly what's going to happen.
You know where you came from, you knew why you were here, you knew where you were going.
Yeah. And so then you come out here and you're like, I don't know anything. And it's such a scary feeling to have everything ripped from you and then to have to rebuild what it is. And now I find a little bit of comfort in it. There are some nights where I'm like, what if there's nothing when we die?
What about you, Amanda?
I don't know. I honestly
too, huh?
don't know. Yeah, because I hate being like, I know that there's an afterlife and there's a God, because I haven't died. I have not died, and I can't tell you.
On ayahuasca.
You did?
Yeah, I experienced death, and it was wild.
Wow.
But here's the thing, like,
Did you see Joseph Smith?
no, but I got to visit hell.
Oh, shit.
It was great. It was like an empty room, a warehouse, and there was like people sweeping, and it felt like a failed marketing experiment. That's what I saw in that one. Anyway,
It's not that bad, actually.
it was like, this was the scary thing. But doing ayahuasca, it gave me this, like I get why people believe in previous life, afterlife, because I experienced it. But here's the thing. I cannot, like it's coming from where I come from. If I'm being honest with what I've seen people believe, you have to at some point distrust parts of your own, like even if you experience it, like you can't. I'm not saying you're denying what you've experienced, but here's a perfect example. Mormonism hijacks certain parts of your experience. Like, oh, you feel this? It's the Holy Ghost. You experience this, it's God speaking to you. You have this thought, that's God. Just because I experienced something on ayahuasca, even though it felt so real, there's a part of me that's like, well, it's still just my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it was I cannot pretend that I have the full explanation as to why my brain is operating the way that it is. So even that I'm open to, I don't know.
Right.
Like, it did a lot of good for me, does a lot of things, but yeah, I still don't know what happens before this or after this or if there's anything. That has shifted in me pretty recently. In the past year, at first it was terror, like, what if this is it?
Mm-hmm.
But then it created this focus, and for some reason it's really special to me now. To like, this could be it.
Mm-hmm.
We've got one life. You know what sounds horrible? Eternity.
The only way I can imagine it being heaven is if there is eternal progression.
Sure. But I've really thought,
Sure.
after you progress, I don't know, like I've really thought about this, like this is one that I've really gone and I was like, after the 1 millionth year of progression, like they make it, it's like, I don't know what could possibly be more sinister than the concept of eternity. Like, again, like...
But just how you're like seeking the truth, sorry, I'm kind of...
Yeah, this is great. I like this.
You're seeking the truth and then that truth brought you this other truth. And then it's like, it's so empowering.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if there's an eternity after this, that's what it's like. And you don't even know what's up there. Because just like that coming out of the cave, you don't even know what's out there. And once you're out there, then you can get through it. Yes.
How do you know that that's really a thought, or that's not just your Mormon upbringing around that beautiful idea of eternity?
Well, my Mormon upbringing wasn't that you progress. It was like, we're in heaven now.
Well, you're progressing to the celestial kingdom now.
Yeah, but once you get there, then you're there. You know, there's no progression after that. And in my brain, that's hell. No progression is hell. Because in the order it was hell. There was a roof on my progression, and that was hell.
They do say that in our lifetime we could experience some form of like, this is getting sci-fi philosophical, but some form of like eternity, because if we could get to the place because of technology that we can upload ourselves to technology and live forever, I totally would. But at some point,
It would get boring.
I think it's at least worth the contemplation that it's not necessarily awesome. I think that's really my point. The concept of eternity is not necessarily amazing, but there are things that we do that we just don't ever even pause and consider that actually that could be a horrible idea. And we take it like it's this amazing, obvious thing.
That's a good point, yeah. Because there could be a point in, like what you're saying, like if you get to that whatever millionth or whatever year, and you're like, I'm done. I've done all I can do. Now I'm curious what your thought is on this, because in my brain, and I don't know if this is the cult in me or if it's like, if it's human to think there is an afterlife. Because I feel like everyone thinks about death.
Here's the thing. Both of those are true.
Okay.
It could be the cult in you, but I think this is worth pointing out to anybody that is watching. To be culty is to be human.
Mm-hmm.
Like this whole conversation that we've just had is the craziness of humanness on display. Like, so I think it is actually incredibly human to want something after this.
Right.
Because it's also freaking terrifying. Like, if this ends...
Right. Did you guys believe in having testimony through your father? Like, you didn't have to question, you could just have it through your father.
Yeah,
Yeah,
something
that was
like
ours
that.
too.
Yeah.
But I was like, you can't get testimony without questioning.
Joseph Smith asked the question.
Exactly.
He went to the forest and said, we could do a whole other episode on that.
we will be back.
A whole episode on Joseph Smith. Like, he changed things later. He didn't talk about how he saw God in Jesus when he was 14. It wasn't until a decade later he's like, oh, by the way, 10 years ago, in a way that it cannot be verified, I saw God in Jesus. It pisses me off the more I learn about psychology and how the revisionist history that guy was. Joseph Smith was a great entrepreneur. I do want to say that.
Yeah,
like,
you gotta give him props.
You gotta get, like, he created
because
a
your leader, our leader, they got the kind of like the people already. The people were already brainwashed. The people were already born into it, right? Mm-hmm. Joseph Smith was like, hello,
dude,
come over here.
Dude, and the way he did it too, like, genius. Like, get somebody that's susceptible and be like, okay, I have this book and I really need it to be printed. Oh, I'm going to have God tell me that this dude should mortgage his farm to print the book. Genius. And he did it and it worked. I need to get Emma to be okay with the fact that I had sex with like Fanny Alger, so I'm going to create this revelation to tell Emma that she's going to be destroyed if she doesn't accept me. Like, genius. You can create these thought traps that the questioning itself is reinforcing of the belief, and let me tell you what I mean. Joseph Smith creates this thing that's like that the outside world is evil, and so they're trying to tear him down. So if he does anything that's shady and you point it out, it's like proof that he's a prophet because the outside world is just trying to tear him down.
Right.
It's this whole thing of almost like in Mormonism, they're like, the devil wants to make you think he's not real. So that if you question, like, is hell real? Is the devil real? It's like, well, that's the devil. Making you think
That's
that.
proof right there.
Exactly.
But
It's like this
also-
self-reinforcing thing.
I think it's also what they did with Joseph Smith. Well, it's all been trickled down to, well, Christ was murdered. And so Joseph Smith was murdered because he was such a good person. And so the outside world, they kind of use that even in the word, like the outside world's not going to understand the true teachings, just like they killed Christ.
Yeah, if you're LDS, do not watch this and know that Joseph Smith was arrested like 37 times, which again
But
just
here's the
proves how
thing,
good he was.
I have a adopted family who will listen to me talking about how I don't like Joseph Smith because a lot of them nowadays actually don't they say we don't like polygamy, we don't like all the things that happened before, right? But in Utah, I don't know if you've met a few of them. In Utah, there are some men in these not the polygamous church, in the LDS church who think they're going to live polygamy in the afterlife.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I'm like, okay, Doctrine and Covenants 132. I guess you really like that verse, but sorry, we went on a tangent with that whole thing. But I usually ask order members, ex-order members this question, and I kind of want to ask you to see like what you would say because I'm sure at least a few people from your group are going to be watching this, and if you could say something that's going to actually get to them and hold a value to them, what would you say to them?
That's such a good question. It depends on where they're at.
I
At the
guess
end of
it
the
depends
day,
on the person you're talking to.
yeah, at the end of the day, I wouldn't give them any advice.
Really?
Yeah, because who the fuck am I? I'm just living my own life, doing my own thing. So I'm just sharing my truth.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is, if you are getting value from your life, and you can honestly say, this is for me and I'm fully choosing it, and the way you can test it is remove yourself. Could you choose something else and not feel socially shunned? Okay, but if you feel that social pressure, just know that that could be it. And so that's one side of the attitude. One attitude is like, don't take any advice from me. Like, I'm just, like, do your own thing. If anything I said is of value, great. But the other thing I would say, too, is like, I don't know how to instill this into someone, however, but you matter. Like, the individual matters. You're taught so much to just listen to somebody else above you and what the church is saying. And at the end of the day, you matter. If you choose something that is completely different, you get to do that.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, if you fully, I care way less about what somebody believes. I care way more how they came to the belief. If somebody went through some long spiritual journey and they ended up in the work, great. But make sure it's yours.
Yeah. Make
No.
sure it's not based off of
Make sure it's
someone
not your
else.
dad's testimony. Make sure it's freaking yours. Make sure that you, and when I say make it yours, like, don't just take all of the years and years of going to church and the rationalization that everybody says of why it's true. If first of all, here's a good test, and you can take this any religion you're in, any group you're in. If what you believe feels identical or really close to the group you're around, it's not yours. Because the thing I know is that human beings are unique. You and I, we came from similar things. If we keep talking, we're going to find way more differences, which is great. Within the same church, you're going to find nuances. You and your brother are going to have nuances to each other, right? And if you have the exact same belief, you're believing the same narrative. So go deeper and find what you actually believe.
Yeah, I like that. That's similar to what my thing that I would say is question everything. That was mine.
Yeah.
Question everything
A
until it makes sense.
mind full of conclusion has no room for expansion. You have to be open. Besides, Joseph Smith questions, so
Yeah.
What could it hurt?
Yeah. And
What could hurt?
believe
What's
in
the
him, right?
question everything? What's the worst that could happen?
Exactly. The worst is you'll find the answer. Or you won't, I guess. I don't know. There's two options. But yeah, that was my last question.
If you go to cowboy.com/podcast, you can enter your information to get notified when it goes out.
And that'll be, I think I'm going to put that as the first link, so you guys can just click it right down below. And I think we'll be seeing more of you too, because I know Eskel wants to interview you.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I took a ton of notes about this.
And when Cultured launches, do you want to come on my show?
Yes, definitely.